The year was 1849, and the oppressive, humid air of Richmond, Virginia, pressed down on the shoulders of Henry Brown like a physical weight, one he had carried since the day he was born. He was a piece of property, a slave belonging to the notorious tobacco manufacturer Samuel O. Petit. Henry was 29 years old, a skilled worker in the factory, earning his master a handsome profit every week. But his world, a world where he was allowed no agency, no ownership of his own soul, had been irrevocably shattered months earlier. The memory was a raw, perpetual wound. His wife, Nancy, and their 3 small children, a 4th was due any day, had been sold to a new master in North Carolina, a transaction sealed not by human cruelty alone, but by a debt owed to Petit's second wife, a debt that outweighed Henry's and his family's humanity. It was the brutal, unsparing logic of the chattel system. Henry had pleaded, bartered, even offered the meager savings he had secretly amassed, but the papers were signed, the deal struck. He watched as they were marched away, the sound of Nancy's weeping, a phantom echo that would never leave him. The auctioneer's hammer had not just sealed a sale, it had hammered a spike into Henry's heart, a spike that birthed a desperate, astonishing idea. He lay awake in the suffocating darkness of his Richmond quarters, the idea taking shape, mad, improbable, and utterly unprecedented. It was a plan that required an almost insane combination of courage, mechanical precision, and blind faith. Henry Brown resolved to deliver himself from slavery. He would not run through swamps and forests, hiding by day and creeping by night like so many desperate souls. He would use the very engines of commerce, the great network of trains and steamers that profited from his subjugation, to carry him to freedom. He would mail himself. This was not a flight of fancy. It was a cold, calculated engineering problem. His life depended on solving it. The primary accomplice and the key to the entire scheme was James C. A. Smith, a free black shoemaker and friend, a man whose quiet resolve matched Henry's fevered desperation. Together they plodded in the dead of night, their voices low, tracing phantom routes on rough-hewn tables. The destination was Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the heart of the Quaker abolitionist movement, and crucially, a free state separated from Virginia by the state of Maryland, a distance of over 350 miles as the railway lines stretched. The sheer physical requirements of the plan were daunting. Henry, a man of average build, needed a container that was large enough to hold him, yet inconspicuous enough to be accepted as commercial freight. The chosen dimensions were critical: 3 feet long, 2 feet 8 inches deep, and 2 feet wide. This precise geometry would be his entire world for the next leg of his life. James, using his contacts, commissioned a sturdy, thick-planked wooden box crafted from the finest Carolina pine, ensuring it was strong enough to withstand the rough handling of 19th-century railway porters. Inside the box, Henry had Smith bore a trio of small, strategically placed holes, one near his head, another near his torso, and a third near his feet. These were his lifelines, his infinitesimal allowance of oxygen. His only provisions were a small bladder of water and a few biscuits, but his greatest need would not be food or water, it would be air, stillness, and silence. The total weight of the package, Henry calculated, would be around 200 pounds, a heavy but plausible weight for a large commercial crate of dried goods or manufactured wares. The crucial piece of documentation was the address. The box was to be shipped to the prominent Philadelphia Quaker merchant and abolitionist, William Johnson, who, along with another contact, would be waiting at the other end. A third, and perhaps most complex player was required, a white accomplice to handle the official transaction. The laws of the South, particularly after the Natter-Turner Rebellion, were a labyrinth of paranoia, making any public, unsupervised movement by a black man, even a free one, highly suspect.
Samuel O. Petit, Henry's master, was a severe man, but he was also a man who appreciated the necessity of a good wager. Henry's brilliance lay in seizing on this. He feigned an agonizing sickness, convincing Petit that he was entirely incapable of work. This secured him a week's leave. The sickness was real only in its psychological toll, but the ruse worked. The official transaction was handled by a sympathetic white shoe dealer named Samuel A. Smith, no relation to James. He was an outsider, a New Englander with abolitionist leanings who had temporarily relocated to Richmond. He had to assume the air of a regular, disinterested merchant sending a valuable but ordinary package. On the morning of March 29, 1849, the final arrangements were made. Henry, having bid a silent, agonizing farewell to the city that held his heart in chains, arrived at the rendezvous point. He paid Samuel A. Smith $86, every cent of his life's savings, a sum equivalent to many thousands of dollars today, for the cost of the express service. The fee was exorbitant, but it was the price of his life, his freedom. He stripped down to a simple, light shirt and trousers. James C. A. Smith was there, his face etched with a fear he fought to conceal. Henry, with a calm that stunned even his friend, climbed into the box. He lay on his back, his body purled awkwardly to fit the narrow space. The thick pine planks were a world closing in. The last thing he saw was the face of James C. A. Smith before the lid was hammered down. The nails were driven home, each stripe a deafening, terrifying percussion in his claustrophobic coffin. With a final whisper, James painted the address onto the side and, crucially, scrawled the words, "This side up with care," a final desperate plea to the universe. The nightmare journey began immediately. The box was dragged and loaded onto a dray cart, the jolting motion already a physical torment. Henry, sweat stinging his eyes, focused only on the light filtering through the tiny air holes. The primary danger was not suffocation, but being placed upside down. The warning, "This side up with care," was not legally binding, merely a request, and in the rough, heedless world of freight, it was often ignored. His worst fear materialized almost instantly. The box was not lifted, but abruptly tilted and dropped. He slid violently to one side, his world inverting. He was now standing on his head, his weight pressing down on his neck and skull. Blood rushed to his brain, his eyes felt as if they would pop out, and the pain in his neck was excruciating, a bone-deep agony that promised paralysis. The air holes were now useless, covered by the plank he was pressing against. Henry Brown was suffocating, suspended in a dark, agonizing purgatory. He dared not cry out. A single sound, a moan or movement, would betray the entire plot. He bit down on his tongue, tasted blood, and fought the rising, blinding panic. His mind, however, did not surrender. He realized he was in a railway baggage car, the noise of the wheels on the iron rails a deafening, rhythmic roar. The journey was underway, and he was already dying. He had to remain silent. He remained inverted for a brutal 90 minutes, minutes that stretched into an eternity of throbbing pain and air deprivation. He felt consciousness slipping away, his body beginning to spasm in involuntary protest. Then, miraculously, the box was moved again. He felt a sudden, dizzying sense of rotation, and then a blissful, blessed return to his correct orientation. The air holes were clear. He inhaled deeply, gasping, tasting the dust and the pine, but most importantly, the life-giving oxygen. He knew with a spiritual certainty that a divine hand had intervened. The rest of the first leg, the trip from Richmond to Fredericksburg, was a monotonous torture of bumps, jostles, and the constant unnerving feeling of his crate being mere inanimate cargo. At Fredericksburg, he was loaded onto a steamer for the next segment of the journey, up the Potomac River to Washington, D.C. The sensation of the boat's movement, the rocking, the engine's thrumming vibration was different, a gentle sway compared to the railway's brutal rattle. Yet on the steamer, another danger emerged, the rough handling of the crew. He could hear voices, loud and careless, and then felt a sickening lurch as he was dropped again and then rolled. The box slid across the deck, coming to rest with a hard thud. He knew he had landed on his side, his body pressing painfully against the narrow walls, but at least he could breathe. His entire existence was now measured in the sensory details of his prison. The temperature, fluctuating wildly, the direction of travel. He tried to navigate by the shadows and sounds of the crew. At one point, he heard a man sit down heavily on the box itself, complaining to another about the weight of the goods. The fear was overwhelming, but he remained motionless, silent, a wooden idol carved of flesh and bone. The total travel time was estimated to be 27 hours. 27 hours of absolute confinement, hunger, thirst.